Welcome to Legend Makers, the podcast where education's true heroes take center stage.
Shine like a ray from the sun. There's something people look for but never can find.
All right, we're back with Legend Makers podcast, and I am with none other than Miss Dugan, otherwise known as Molly Dugan, TikTok celeb. Nice to see you.
Hi.
It's amazing. It's so great to finally get to talk to you because I've been watching your TikToks and I'm blown away by them. You have popped. This has been a lot of fun to watch you. And really, to talk to you today is great. I'm really excited to get into this with you. Tell us about you. So we talked a little bit before we turned on the recording. But what I'd like to do is get to know you as an educator and beyond the TikTok star that we see, who you're kind of becoming.
Okay.
And so tell us about yourself. Tell us about what grades you're teaching and all that.
Oh my gosh, what a hard question because I can talk like it's a stupid amount. So cut me off if you need to. But I am a high school English teacher. I'm in Kansas. I've always taught in Kansas, grew up in Kansas, Chiefs fan. We talked about that a little bit. And so yeah, this is my first year teaching high school English, actually. This is also my sixth year teaching. So for 5 years, I was a middle school teacher. I taught seventh and eighth grade English, and I was ready for a change. So now I'm in the high school arena, a little bit different than STEM, obviously, more in
Yeah.
the arts. But yeah, loving it so far.
So 5 years middle school, and now you're
Almost one semester into
one
high school.
semester high school. What do you like better, high school or middle school?
Stop. That is literally the hardest question. I am learning, and I always
Well,
was
let me rephrase it. Go ahead. So, what are the key differences for you between middle school and high school? Let's not pick favorites. How's that?
okay, yeah, because I think that in education, where one thing gets harder, something else gets easier based on the age range.
Hmm.
So, like
Like
in
what?
high school, they are so much more independent.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm finding if they're not gonna say my name. I don't hear my name as many times throughout the day. Or like I go home with a lot more mental energy in that way. But that's easier than middle school. But they also don't really want to talk to me in high school. The way that middle schoolers are like, Miss Dugan, how was your weekend? Blah, blah, blah. Look at this new thing. And you're like, wow, I'm so exhausted, but I'm kind of miss that a little bit.
Yeah.
But what I don't miss is like how overstimulated I constantly was. So what you give up from one grade, you gain something else in the other. So if that's just kind of education, it's a constant scale balancing from the different things that go on, like as a teacher. So that's like some of the big differences. I'm also not used to kids just like their sense of humor is so different at that age. Their like the rigor of what I'm teaching is so different. I mean, the what's it called whenever imposter syndrome. The imposter syndrome I have this year is unreal. And I think that that's just natural whenever you're doing something new, right? You're like
Yeah.
doing kind of have to be bad at something before you're good at it again.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like a first year teacher again, but it's like it's good changes. It's like, okay, this is kind of like reigniting my fire of like I have something that I want to learn, that I want to work hard towards again so I can be good at it. And it feels good to be in that position again. So I'm loving it. I just like had to find a totally different groove. Like some of my get to know you games in the beginning of the year that kids love, they were kind of like crickets. Like the crowd was not really biting. And I was like, this is awkward. So it's just
Totally sweating bullets up there. Like,
I was like, oh my God, they hate me. They think I'm so cringy. I don't know what's happening. So we're getting there. We're getting used to it.
That's great. So 6 years teaching.
Yep.
Did you always want to be a teacher?
No.
How did you? Okay, so this is great. All right. So I want to know, why do you teach? Like what drove you to get into teaching? I'll join.
Okay, I know. It's a little afternoon coffee.
Mhm.
I okay, there's a couple different answers to this. I still really am not much of a future planner. Not the type of person that's like, this is my 10-year plan and blah, blah, blah. Like, I never really had an idea. And so I was not the kid playing teacher growing up. In fact, I did. And my best friend, who's a teacher, she was the teacher and I was the student. Like, it was kind of, all throughout high school, I remember though, my earliest memory of thinking I could be a teacher was in high school. My
Mhm.
junior year, I had an English teacher, Mr. Mans, shout out Mr. Mans. He was this really young guy, new to teaching, and he just brought a different energy to class. I can't even really explain it. He just was really unapologetically himself. And literature, I think just because he didn't make it so assignment based, um, I like actually paid attention to the books that we were reading.
Hmm.
And I remember even like some of his feedback made me feel confident. Like I wrote a paper one time and his feedback just said, "You have a way with words." And something about that made me feel so confident. And I was like, "Oh, am I kind of good at this?" Like, "Oh, I had no idea." Like,
Huh.
and maybe he was just trying to be nice. Maybe it wasn't that great, but those little things where I remember sitting in class one day just thinking, if I taught like this, I think I could do this every day.
Hmm.
And I wasn't set on it yet, but I that was my probably my earliest memory. So then fast forward, I worked at a daycare in high school and I liked working with kids. And then I actually did a teacher program in high school where I got to like go shadow teachers. Hated it. I
Really?
I was like, I will not be a teacher. So I then
Wait, pause.
graduate.
What didn't you like about it?
I don't know. I think, well, okay,
Go
I
ahead.
don't want to like be mean to anyone, but like I think maybe it was the people that I was shadowing
Could
and
be.
that like that where it's just like and maybe it was just I was more of a teacher assistant where I wasn't really in the classroom. I was making a lot of copies and
Mm.
doing a lot of things like that. And I think I was just like, well, this is a boring afternoon. Like, so I
Like
think I
this
was
is
just
what I'm
like,
gonna do, not
so I
this.
associated boring afternoons with teaching,
Yeah.
even though I didn't really see teaching. So whatever, I was like, I'm not doing that. Fast forward, I graduate high school and I go to school and I'm like, Dad, I don't know. So I decided to go in undeclared and I got all my gen eds out of the way and I was just like, I don't know, I don't know. I like had a total mental breakdown, was like, Dad, I have no passions and I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm gonna be that person that lives in your basement forever because I never all these things. And he was like, oh my God, like get it together. Like poor guy only had daughters. And whatever, finally my advisor was like, "Hey girl, you got to choose something." And I was like, "Okay. I like being around kids." I went at the time in college I was working as a teacher aide because it was
Okay.
great hours for a college kid. And I was like, "I feel pretty comfortable in a school. I've always kind of had education in the back of my mind." Sure. So I literally chose it
Mm.
because they were like, "You got to choose something." And I was like, it's the only thing I've ever really considered. So sure, I'll just declare it. And I thought, okay. So they were like, do you want to do older kids or younger kids? And I said, let's do older. Literally just like flipping a coin kind of. They said,
Seriously.
what subject? And I said, I was the least bad at English. Was it from that paper that that teacher wrote? I don't know. But I was like, I'm the least bad at English. I'll go with that.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, okay, if I hate this, if I get into this and I hate it, I'll graduate as an English ed major and I'll go to law school.
Huh.
Um, Dad's a lawyer. I come from lawyers. My dad always said, if he could go back, he'd get his undergrad in English because he reads and writes so much.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I was like, I'll go to law school. And I fell in love with it. I
Really?
mean, within the first semester of being an English major, I loved literature. I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I felt it was like, wow, this was meant to be. Everything makes sense. And so it really happened. I think that there were little seeds planted in me along the way,
Mm-hmm.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
but it was never this like I can envision it. It wasn't until I started doing it that.
There's a great Steve Jobs. I'm going to butcher it, but it's Steve Jobs. You can look it up. He talks about dot connecting. He says, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So all of those things, you just said it. There's like this little trail of breadcrumbs, excuse me, that led you to where you ended up. It's easy to look back on them and go, oh yeah, all of those things make sense. And if you look at pretty much anybody, you can go back and say, oh, this had a cumulative effect. If had it not been for this string of events, I wouldn't be here today. That's almost impossible to do looking forward. Sure, you can have
Huh.
visions and you can do, but you don't know what things are going to pop up in your life that are going to change the direction. You could be a lawyer today, right?
Yeah.
You could just as easily be a lawyer or a basketball
Yeah, honestly, honestly,
player.
yeah. Honestly.
Right? So, but
No,
no,
I would
that's
have been
cool.
more volleyball. I would
You
have
think
been more.
volleyball would be your thing?
I was a volleyball player, yeah.
Were you? You know, I love the ones where they keep spiking it into the guy's head. Do you ever see that one? It's like in
Yeah,
his face. It's like a total, I don't know how they did it, but it's
being
perfect.
tall, it comes with risks, let me
That's
tell you.
great. That's it. Good. So that's how you kind of so Mr. Mans was the teacher.
Yeah, I think
I
that was
hear
kind of the
that.
first seed.
Like this is the third. So you're lucky number 13 here. This is
Love
our
it.
13th pod. I've only been doing this for a little while, the podcast, right? Um, and I've heard that now on almost every with every person I've talked to, right? That there was a teacher that kind of had an impact. And I think that's important because think about that really. And it's only the teachers that I talk to, but I can look back on my life and go, yeah, there were a couple of teachers that like impacted me. There was somebody last week I was talking, was it last week or the week before? And they said, I asked them like why one was a big thing for them. They said, look, the thing about teaching is that you may be, if you're feeling a little burnt or fried, they were like, just think about this. You may be the brightest thing in somebody's day that day. Some
Yeah,
kid may be having a rough time at home. They might come from a messed up family life that we can't even begin to imagine. And seeing you on any given day might be the bright light of their day. And I think
right.
that's really important because teachers are that, right? You that's what you guys do. You have this impact. And I think it's when I think about that kind of effect that they have on everybody, I think anybody you could ask anybody, name a teacher that has they could do it.
Right.
Pretty cool. So you fell into it. Now here you are, 6 years in. You're loving it still.
Yes, I yes, but it hasn't been a linear journey, let me tell you. I haven't loved it every second of the way. And I think that that's important to say because I want people to like know and I want other people to hear this and maybe feel like, wow, I'm not messed up for feeling this way too. I almost left last year. I
Hmm.
almost didn't continue teaching.
Why?
Um, I was burnt out. I well, I was burnt out. There was a lot of reasons. I was going through a hard time personally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which when I always felt like before in the years prior, whenever I went through a hard time personally, school felt like an escape. I was like, okay, things might be really messed up in my personal life, but I feel confident at school. I'm passionate. At least I have that. That's what it felt like. It was like, then I'll pour myself into this thing that I know is impactful and any fears that I had about my life, oh, I'm gonna die. I'm single, so oh, I'm gonna die alone or whatever. It's like, who cares? I'm doing something impactful, and it would really calm those stresses.
Mm-hmm.
That stopped happening last year. So I was going through a hard time, and school almost made it worse. And that's for a lot of reasons. Like any job, changes happen. And, work is never linear for people. There's good and bad seasons of it. And it was a really tough season. A lot was being placed on me, on top of these already hard times. And I just started having these moments where I was like, and I'm gonna be really transparent. We know teachers don't make a lot of money.
Right,
We
right,
don't
right.
make a lot of money. And I'm in my 20s and things are getting more expensive and I was like, what am I doing? Like I'm successful. I'm good at what I do. I got my degree and I can't afford X, Y, and Z, like basics. Like what am I pouring my energy into? And usually I'm like, but no, Molly, you're doing a good thing. Whatever. This is your mission in life. It's more than just a job. But it's sometimes it's hard to quiet those voices whenever you're like, but am I also being practical about my life? Is there something so it's really started to question, is there something else I could be doing with my talents and my skills that keeps me safe in my personal life, financially, emotionally, mentally, but is still impactful? Is there something else out there that isn't draining me so much that I could still find a lot of passion for? So I just started exploring it. I started exploring what other jobs could I be good at? And I talked to my family a lot, and my dad and I are pretty close, and he said something really impactful to me. And he said, Molly, because I felt really embarrassed. I said, I feel like I'm failing at teaching. Like, am I a quitter? If I leave, am I a quitter on this? Because I don't want to be a statistic. Last year, my fourth year, I said, this is my dream job. And now this year I want to leave it? Like, what? And
Hmm.
he said, you might stay in it, you might not, but he said, first of all, you're in your 20s and you're supposed to be exploring these things in your 20s.
That's right.
You're going through normal things for someone your age. And he said, you're going through normal things for someone at 50. You
That's right.
can change anytime you want. But he also said, teaching is not your calling. It's not. He said, is your calling is something bigger. Teaching is a job that you can use for your calling. And that made a lot of sense to me. Like, my calling might be, I really like to connect with people.
Yeah.
I do really like, I do like the aspects of teaching. I like that. So I feel talented at that. Like, there's a natural instinct in me for that. But he was like, you can do many jobs with that calling that are impactful. So I started looking into like nonprofit work
Mhm.
and just like all these different types of jobs that I might be interested in. And but ultimately, and I really did, I applied to places outside of teaching, and I ultimately decided, you know what? I don't want to throw in the towel yet. Maybe I
Hmm.
just need to change. Maybe I need a new environment. And so I did. I decided, let's give high school teaching a try. You've always wanted to try high school teaching. Let's just do it. So I did that, and I'm really glad that I decided to stick with it. Um, I'm really loving it. I think I've made a lot of peace with the fact that this exact role might not be my forever. I might
Right.
want to be a school counselor. I might want to
Right.
work for a curriculum company, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I think last year that really scared me. And I think it scares a lot of teachers of like, well, what else can I do? This is all I'm good at. This is part of my identity because we pour so much of ourselves into it that it's almost like this is how I describe myself. Well, I'm a teacher. I'm going to have to refine my identity. And I think I'm glad I went through that process last year because I really made peace with the fact that, Molly, that's not your identity. You are so much bigger than teaching.
Right.
And there's no shame in saying, hey, this isn't serving me right now. Because yes, it is a mission. And yes, we pour ourselves into the work, but I also have an obligation to myself to protect myself.
100%.
And I think teachers do. And especially, I can't imagine if you have a family. If you need to explore something else because of your family, you don't have the mental ability to be the best mom that you want to be or whatever it is, that's your right and there's no shame in that. So
Yeah.
I really made peace with that last year. Um, so moving forward, if I decide to do something else, great. But I'm really glad that I'm still in it.
Well, you've also, and that's great. I'm so glad. Thank you, by the way, for the transparency, because that is the kind of thing that people are going to want to hear, right? I'm sure you're not alone in that. I'm sure a lot of people get in and then they start to go, wait, where am I? What am I doing? It happens to all of us in all kinds of careers. And your father's spot on. 20s are when you're supposed to be kind of searching and wandering and looking and exploring. Um, doesn't define you, right? You're an
Right.
educator. Maybe teaching is what you do today, but maybe at heart, you're kind of an educator. I think maybe you elevate that. And you're kind of doing that. I mean, so for those that don't know, I met Molly, Ms. Dugan, on TikTok and Instagram because you've kind of gone viral, have you not?
I have, yes, I would say
And
that.
so like when I think about as now the entrepreneur in me starts to get all excited for you, obviously
Yeah.
the opportunity. And this is, when I grew up, we didn't have this opportunity. When I came up in my 20s, none of this existed, right? Like it was just there was no internet. There was nothing.
Right.
Rotary phones. And so
You're like, the
I'm
internet, what's that?
gonna blow the dust off. So you got so much opportunity now. And I think that you can use, I mean, let me ask you this. Do you think that your platform on TikTok, so you're Miss Dugan on TikTok, right? And you've got what, like 260,000 followers or something to
Yeah.
date?
Yep.
Something
Give or
like
take.
that, right? Which is pretty cool. And your videos, some of them get millions of views,
Hmm.
thousands and thousands of comments. Do you ever think about that as a platform to do the bigger thing?
I do. Um, I think about it. And I think that that's where it's actually so funny you bring this up because I've really been thinking about that a lot lately. Um, Especially whenever it come, yeah, I definitely have because for example, the election. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, I find value both in people that steer clear of those sorts of things on their social medias because sometimes people just need a place where they can not be burdened by some of those thoughts. Yes, it's important for us to think about it and do our duties and whatever,
Of course.
but also it's nice to turn our brains off sometime and just be entertained. So,
Sure is. Yep.
but I also find it very admirable and brave when people that have been given a platform utilize it for what they think is right. And hey, I with great power comes great responsibility, right?
Yeah.
And so not saying that I would want to get political on my platform necessarily, but with like higher like, hey, you have this voice now, how are you going to use it?
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought about that and I just don't know yet because I mean, I'm 6 months into this.
Yeah.
I my first post was back last May.
Is that it? 6 months? It's all
It's
happened. And so it's a whirlwind, isn't it?
it's a whirlwind. So I was only teaching middle school for about 3 weeks whenever it all happened. Like it was my last 3 weeks of middle school, and then we went on summer break, and I was like, oh my God. So I think I'm still trying to like I still have the training wheels on a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely think about that. And hey, let's envision. I haven't tried to let myself dream too big. Like from so far, I keep telling my friends, hey, if I totally flop on TikTok, will you still be my friend? Like, hey, if I get canceled, will you still love me? And they're like, uh, but I just have this mindset of like, I'm scared that if I like dream too big with it, it's
Yeah.
all gonna be taken away from me, or it's gonna be like, no, it was temporary. So I just keep telling myself, hey, you're doing this for fun. It's a supplementary thing. If it continues, great. If not, you're okay. And so that way I don't
Right.
get too sad about it.
That's right.
But I also need to be like confident in it and try to grow it. So I shouldn't be too passive with it.
Yeah.
So I thought about it, but we'll see.
Well, it's fun content. I get a kick out of it. I think you're
It's
great.
fun.
You're truly a natural. In other words, it takes a certain type to be able to get in front of the camera and put it out there. And you got a wit to you that's kind of dry, which works. Like you've got this kind of dry wit. Your lists are always
Yeah.
really great. Your little listicles are kind of cool. I try to emulate you and
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love it.
a little snarkiness sometimes, but it's great. It's
I
all
know.
totally put on. It's hysterical. And your kids are funny. I'm sure. Did they get a kick out of it?
Yeah, well, so this is so different because I was in a school district where I had been there for 5 years and they all knew me. And so it was like everyone would talk about it because I was still like, whoa, I can't believe that this is happening. But then this year I didn't just move schools, I moved districts.
Mm.
So like nobody knows me at all. And so it's like a little bit different where they're like, some of the kids are like, I don't really know her. Should I say something? Where like, if I was in my old district, they probably, all these kids would be like talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
But they definitely like will say things and they're like, some kids will come up to me in school and be like, oh, are you the teacher on TikTok? I'm like, yeah, I am. But it also it's a tightrope to walk because
Yeah.
teachers, there's a million eyes on you,
That's right.
million eyes on you. And your clientele is children who
Hmm.
have parents who care about their children, rightfully
That's right.
so. And so come in, I'm like, okay, I like immediately whenever this happened, I'd already been hired. Whenever I blew up, I'd already been hired in my new district. So I called that principal and was like, I gotta tell you, this happened. Is this okay? Am I allowed to even have a social media? I don't know. And he's been so supportive.
Mm.
But even the district, it's a much bigger district. So they were like, had to go through them. Like, what are the rules? What's in the policy handbook? All this stuff. And
Yeah,
so
right.
you'll notice like I don't film in my classroom because that
Right.
was kind of a boundary that was laid and stuff. So you just have to be really careful. So yeah, my students get a kick out of it, but I really try to not talk about it too much
Yeah.
because I don't want anyone to think as like, oh, she cares about that more than her job of teaching. Like, no, my priority is being a teacher,
And you don't
etc.
want it to be a distraction in the class and things
Yeah,
like
I don't want
that.
them to be
Overshadow.
performing, hoping that I put them on it on my TikTok or
Do you get
whatever.
any of that?
Honestly, no, because I
No,
really
good.
don't put them on there that much. Um, if I was in middle school, my old district, maybe a little bit more just because I kind of know some of those kids and they were
Yeah.
crazy, but high school's just different. And like I also some of the content that I'm like, man, that's pretty funny. Like that would be a really good story. It's like I kind of have in my back pocket, but it's like I would never want something to happen in class
Yeah.
and then I post it and it could be like, man, was she making fun of me online? Like that's
Sure. So you keep
embarrassing.
that completely separate. You keep it
Yes.
pretty anonymous in terms of like, this is what I heard.
Yeah.
It's like nobody, there are no names associated with it. No,
Right. But like the kids know. It's
they
like,
know.
man,
Of
I was
course
in
they
class
know.
and they said that. So I
Kind of
just
like
have
your
to
little
be
secret,
really, yeah. So I
right?
have to be really careful about like how I do it. So really, I think because I don't like, let's say they do something funny in class, sometimes a kid will be like, "Oh, that's making a TikTok," and I'm like, "No, it's not because you just said that." Like, no. So that kind of shuts it down a little bit, you know.
That's good. That's
Yeah.
just cool. So like you touched on this a little bit, and I want to get back into like your because you pushed through, right? You were feeling this, and I so again, I talked a little bit about this before you and I went on the air, but I was a horrible student. I say client, customer, horrible student, horrible, horrible. I was like the kid that you didn't want, right? I was that. Oh God, there's the Buell kid, right?
Yeah.
And so as I've fallen into education, right? So I too, I empathize with you 100% about the kids. You have to be real sensitive about, I mean, we're working with K through. And
Yeah.
so, and primarily K through like six, young kids. So even more, they are completely, off limits, right? They have to be so
Hmm.
careful. But so to get back to like what you're talking about of pushing through. So I'm enamored with what you guys do. I'm just blown away that you guys put yourselves out there. To your point, you're underpaid. So it's a selfless kind of a thing. And so I think about like there's got to be when I think about teachers that are just trying to like where you were 6 years ago. Are you thinking about it? Are you just about to get started? What would your advice be to like those newcomers, whether on the fence or thinking or just starting out? And then part two to that, maybe you can split it two parts is the burnout, the feeling like, what the heck am I doing? Like, why am I doing this anymore? Like, what would you say to those people?
Man, it's so hard because obviously everybody has I can only do it based off my experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess if anybody can relate to this, I think if I'm coming in new and you're anything like me, man, I was excited. I was like, I knew it was like all the quotes that you hear and like the cheesy quotes about like, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life and like all those cheesy things. I was like feeling, I was like, I know
Mhm.
that this is what I'm supposed to do because I really feel like it's not work. And I feel like in my student teaching, I was like, this isn't even work. Like I
Yeah.
love this. Or like I was dreaming about when I got my own classroom and like it just felt exciting. And like the scary parts of it were like an exciting scary. It was like, no, I want to learn how to do that better. And I
Right.
had never really felt a passion like that before. I
Hmm.
didn't have a lot. I was a sports player. We did tons of sports in my family. So, and I was good at sports, but I wasn't like, I want to be a D1 athlete. So I didn't really have any hobbies that I was like internally motivated for. Um, I did sports because I wanted to make the team, but not because I was like that in love with it. So
Right.
this was the first time that I felt that. And if you're feeling that and you're new, you're new to teaching or whatever it might be, man, embrace that and roll with it and don't let crabby veteran teachers take that away from you. And I say that, and
Yeah.
I even might even be talking about me because I'll tell you right now, last year I probably wasn't a peach. Like I probably wasn't.
Yeah.
I had a student teacher last year, and I was in the thick of being like, man, I can't even make it to Christmas break. I might have to break my contract. I'm done. What am I doing? Like really down bad.
Right.
She was coming in being like, so what do you love about teaching? And I was in the moment I wanted to be like, nothing. Run. But I didn't want to be that person. And so I
Sure. Yeah.
wasn't as like bright and chipper. Like even this year, I'm like, man, I could tell you everything I love because I'm just in a different headspace now. But
Yeah.
I remember my first year, I was like making decorations for my classroom, like hand making these flowers to put on I spent
The
all
first
summer.
year classroom, the first year teacher
Oh,
classroom. See, I hear this. This is all new to me. So, but you're saying things, and I'm just thinking as you're talking, I'm laughing because I hear this now. So it's the first year teach. Somebody said the other week, or Dina, she was like, there was a 60-year-old teacher been teaching for 40 years, and she goes, and she still had like a first year teacher classroom. Like it was
Yeah.
all set up and everything.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I heard was stay out of the lunchroom. Like just stay away. Like
Just
don't
don't even
listen
go
to
in.
the old, the people that have been there forever that are feeling fried and burned out on their way out because it'll just demoralize you.
Yes. That's literally my advice. I remember that first year I was making those things, and this woman who like my family knew, she was a teacher, is a teacher, and she totally just was trying to be funny, and I don't fault her for this at all, but came in and was like, "Oh yeah, just wait till your 20th year. You're not gonna do anything for your classroom." And I remember being like, "Oh, well, that's sad." Like it just it was just a little bit of like a, well, I hope not.
Yeah.
I'm still putting effort in. And here's the thing, what I'll tell them is when you're feeling passionate and excited, do not let anyone's rain, don't let anyone rain on your parade.
Yeah.
Be excited.
Right.
I will also say you are going to have years where you feel like those crappy teachers. You will, because life is hard. The job is hard. You're going to have a boss that changes the environment of the school. You're going to have a coworker. Whatever it is, you're going to have those years where you're like, man, remember 2 years ago whenever I decorated, I'm not doing anything to my room. But then guess what? 2 years later, something might change again. You might be like, I'm redoing my whole room and I can't wait. It's gonna be up and down, and that's okay.
That's life.
That's life. So when you're feeling passionate and you're feeling excited, in one ear and out the other with the negative.
Yeah.
When you're feeling sad and you're the person raining on your own parade, that's okay. Lean on your people. Just try not to rain on anyone else's, right? But because I just think it's one of those things where there's so many parts to teaching that, man, if it could be you have a really hard bunch of kids that year and you love them, but man, are they making life hard or whatever it might be. And I think that the other thing is, wait, what was the other thing I was going to say? I don't remember what I was going to
Well,
say.
don't rain on your parade. But I was going to ask you, did you have, so you've in middle school, let's go back. Cause I think, oh gosh, man, even in high school, in high school, I was away. I was gone. So by that point, I was already all sent up to Maine, locked up there for a while. I went to this really weird school called Hyde School. You can look it up. It was a character education school. We used to have to
Oh,
dig 6 by 6 foot ditches to bury our attitudes in and stuff like that.
it was like holes,
It was just, they were graves to
like
bury your attitude in.
for your attitude,
We,
quite
we dug
literally.
our own we dug our own graves to put our attitudes. Yeah, and we had
That's
to put them back
crazy.
up
Did
at
it
like
work?
4 in the morning. It did. It was crazy. I went up there. You got to remember, this is the early '80s,
Yeah.
so we were. I went up there at like 14 years old, so I'm really showing my age now, but okay. Um, but I was cut off from like the world, right? Like it was in Maine. I was from Virginia. I grew up outside of Washington D.C., and I went to Maine and was just put into this school and was like, see ya. And see ya. And you
Oh my God.
couldn't, there was no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no nothing. So, first off, what they got away with was incredible, right? Because it was
Yep.
like
No one knew.
total mental torture and nobody knew. And quite frankly, we were up there because our parents were like, good, have at him. Like he's a punk.
Wow.
Do what you will with this boy. He
That's
needs
crazy.
work.
How long were
And
you
so,
there?
aha, 4 years. Now I
Wow.
came home for vacations and stuff, and it was
Yeah.
a co-ed boarding school. It was actually pretty cool. It's called Hyde School, character education.
Okay.
Had to take sports. I wrestled, played football, lacrosse. You had to do sports. And for me,
Uh-huh.
they were like, well, tough guy, huh? There's some, go wrestle, go have some wrestling. That'll teach you. So anyway, so did you ever have a little Scotty Buell in your class that was just like that? Oh, dude, this kid. Do you have one of those? Or have you ever had to deal with those kids?
Yeah.
And so how do you handle a little Scotty Buell, as I'll call him? Because that's what my nickname was, Scotty Buell, right? That was like, oh
That's
God, who's that Scotty Buell?
hilarious.
There he
Um,
is.
it totally depends. It totally depends. Personally, I mean, you hear this all the time. You start with relationship, you try it
Yeah.
out. That's the basis of anything.
Yep.
Because that's usually those kids, that's what they're in need of.
Right. Right.
I truly have a belief that students are missing some kind of a skill if something's going wrong, even if it
Mhm.
just seems like, oh, they're just choosing to not do it. Okay, well, what are they avoiding? What kind of then we need to teach them some perseverance. That's a skill, right?
Mhm.
They're missing some kind of a skill.
Yeah.
And now can that be really annoying sometimes? Of course. And sometimes you're like, just do the work or whatever it might be. Um, I think that relationship building is step number one. I have been really lucky to have some really good mentor teachers, and like instructional coaches that really taught me a lot of interventions. And they're not foolproof, they're not perfect, but trying different interventions and sitting down with the kid and being like, okay, I handed you this worksheet of 10 questions. I know you aren't even going to get started because you're
Mm.
so behind in classes, you don't even see the point of getting started. So I'm going to set this timer for 2 minutes. I'm going to come back in 2 minutes. I want you to have the first two questions answered. And I mean, you literally spoon feed them like that. Or I
Mhm.
had and sometimes that just teaches them like, okay, let's chunk it up. And this isn't news to other teachers. We know accommodations, interventions, we know this. But just for me, it's going back to the basics of like, I'll get overwhelmed with a kid that I don't know how to get through to them. And I'm like, okay, let's just go back to fundamentals of teaching. Let's go back to what we know and what we learned our first few years. And it's like, okay, let's try these things. They're not always going to work, but that's the point of trying them because if it still isn't working, okay, do they need other kinds of services
Right.
um, that I can take to the team and data and whatever, all the record showing and stuff. But
Mm.
I think also with sometimes those kids is like I've had kids in the past like that honestly they didn't like me.
Mm.
I wasn't their teacher. And I
Huh.
think that that was a hard pill for me to swallow, that I think is a hard pill for a lot of teachers to swallow because not every kid is going to like me, especially if
Mm.
I might be one of the first ones that's really challenging them, etc. And that's okay. What matters is that they have an adult in the room
Mhm.
or in the school. So like whenever I was in middle school, teacher, my counterparts, I was really good friends with them. And there was a kid that like for 2 weeks, he would be I couldn't say a word that he wouldn't talk back to, try to challenge,
Mm.
nothing. And I had to just let it roll off, but he was really tight with her, the math teacher. And he'd go in during his breaks or whatever, and they get along great. And then she'd do something to piss him off, and suddenly he liked me again. And you just kind of had to be like, hey, he's mad at me this week. He might be coming to talk to you. And we're like, all right, sounds good. And you just have
Yeah.
to like be okay with the fact that like, hey, not every kid's gonna like me, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, as long as they have someone. If they don't have anyone, okay, as a team, how are we not getting to this kid? And so I think
Mm.
it's
Interesting.
just being looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, what do they actually need from me? Do they need tough love? Do they need me to kind of spoon feed them even if they don't really need it? Like I had a kid one time that this was a very smart kid. And this kid, I'm not kidding, would not respond to me, would not say a word to me. And I was like, I don't know what I did to you. I think that this kid was like this in every class, just almost didn't want to respond just to see how much they could piss you off.
Mhm.
Okay. And you're like, I love to argue, which makes my job really hard because I have to do self-talk a
Yeah.
lot. And
Right.
I have to be like, do not get in a power struggle with this kid. It's not worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I had a really great mentor teacher that was in that class with me because she was a special education teacher. So she was in there sometimes. And one day she came to me and she was like, Molly, you're getting in power struggles. You've got to stop because that's not going to win him over.
Mm.
It's not going to work. And I was like, yeah, and she was like, I get it. We can't let kids get away with things. And she wouldn't let kids get away with things. She's like, I think that this is what he needs. She said, I know he doesn't need the answers to the notes, or
Mhm.
he doesn't need the notes filled out. He doesn't need that accommodation. But just give him the notes. Don't make him fill them out because then he can at least answer the practice questions. And she's like, then the real skill that you want him to get is how to apply the grammar skill. You don't need him to learn how to take notes right now. So just get
Mhm.
him the notes and maybe then we can get something out of him. So I did. And that was really hard for me because I was like, but he doesn't deserve them. He doesn't need them. He's just
Mm.
choosing not to take notes. And as soon as I did that, it was almost like something clicked in this kid's brain where he was like, she's not just out to get me.
Mm.
He started taking notes on his own. He started replying to me. He started coming up to me and telling me about his weekend. It was like,
A
as
breakthrough.
soon as that little bit of trust was built of like, this teacher isn't just in opposition of me, he was one of my favorite students. He was so interesting. And it was all because that teacher was like, given a little bit and he might give back a lot.
Interesting. It
And
reminds
now,
me of the like when you use the in the fighting technique when you use the force with it as opposed to pulling against it. Sometimes you have to like pull into it, let it happen versus the more pressure you put on it, the more resistance you're going to get
yeah,
versus kind of going with it, going into the turn, right? Which is what you did there. You kind of diffused the tension and then breakthrough. Now you've built some trust with this kid, got a confidant in you. That's pretty cool. So
yeah.
um, let me ask you this because I don't want to. I know you probably have lots of other things to be doing, like going and making TikToks. But
Oh,
so I know I'm just playing. So what? I'm an optimist. So I man, I could talk to you forever about like business and entrepreneurship with all your with what's going on around you and what you could do with that because that's my thing. I love it. Um, so I like, and that's part of the entrepreneur in me is I'm a perpetual optimist. There's not a lot of things that I don't think I can do. Right? I can climb that mountain. Sure, it's just Everest. I can climb that. It's just a hill. Right. So that's kind of how
yeah.
I. Not that I'm climbing Everest anytime soon, but what? not, not even base camp. How's that?
Hey, we'll see.
What? That may be kind of cool, actually. Kind of be a neat thing. What are you like optimistic about? So I know there's a lot of like it's real like to your point, you said election, and there's this whole world out there and people can get very negative. And if you're on Twitter or X, you can see that and you can see it anywhere you go. I went to Blue Sky. I'm sorry, it's just the same thing over there. It's just
Yeah.
the same thing. So what what are you optimistic about? Like when you think about it in the context of education and your role in it, what you see, right? Because these kids are in a really interesting time. And quite frankly, you're in an interesting time because you are young yourself. And so there's a lot of road runway ahead of you guys, right? You're young students. I mean, you're even your high school students. What do you look at and go, you know what I'm excited about? This is what excites me, whether it's like
Hmm.
technology or whatever it might be. What is that? Like, what's the optimist that you say?
You know, I I love this question, not because I think it challenges my way of thinking. There's some things that I'm very optimistic about, and there's some things that like I try to avoid because I don't want to be disappointed. So like I
Mhm.
said with my whole social media thing, I try not to think like what could this be because I don't want to be disappointed. And I sometimes think about with school, it's like who knows what the future looks like? All I can control is right now. But some of the things that I've been really seeing, and especially at the high school level, this was really eye-opening to me. My sophomores just read Fahrenheit 451, which is a
Mhm.
dystopian novel
Yep.
and very centered around technology and some would argue censorship and just all these things. And so they wrote a narrative after where they had to look out an issue. They had to choose an issue that they see in the world around them. It could be like on like a personal scale, like bullying, mental health, this,
Mhm.
or it could be something larger like AI, pollution, something like that. And they had to write an imagined story, kind of like dystopian, in a world where that problem was blown up in a
Okay.
big deal. And it's kind of like a what if or what if this continues sort of story. So it was really interesting to see the issues because everyone fixates on different issues in the world around them.
Yeah.
And everyone feels passionate about something different. And so I was number one intrigued to see what they were drawn to and what they're seeing and the idea behind it basically obviously is to send a message. It was supposed to be kind of a cautionary tale. And their stories were so eye-opening because I think that people my generation, my age and up, because I'm like on the very, very end of the millennials, very beginning
Mhm.
of Gen Z. I think us and up get very worried about the future generations. Um, and like, oh, technology and what is it doing to us? They know. They're very aware of the risks of different things and technology and pollution and control and, you know, censorship and all of these things, and a world where art doesn't exist anymore and writing doesn't exist. They're aware.
Hmm.
And I think that that is so hopeful. Um, because I think adults now think, "Oh, I got to fix this problem in these young kids."
Right.
You don't think that they're not going to learn how to have self-control too? Sure, it's important that we help them with those habits. And I think another hope is my district. I think that this is so cool. This year, as a whole district, they banned phones during instructional time. So
Hmm.
kids come into our rooms and they put their phones in like a phone caddy pocket.
Right.
Uh, and they really don't use earbuds either. And
Nice.
there's so much more conversation happening,
Oh,
and
I can't
I mean, we're
imagine.
seeing we're seeing what happens right now with it, but I imagine in a few years after kids have done this for a few years, I'm interested to and excited to see the difference in, like, attention spans and things like that in the classroom, and, like, if they have longer, oh, what's the word? What's the word whenever you stamina, if they have, like, longer
Uh-huh.
stamina to, like, pay attention and read books and
Right.
things. So, I'm really excited to see that, and I think it kinda all goes together for me of, like, people are very scared of these future generations. I have a lot of hope for them,
Yeah.
um, and I think that, we all had a vice growing up that we probably fell to a little bit, but then we also all learned, "Okay, I know what it means to have self-control. I know what it means to form good habits." And I think that they have just as much ability to do that and become incredible functioning adults
Wow.
just like we did. So,
That's amazing. So I love it. So you like this idea. So are you noticing a difference with no cell phones and no earbuds? I mean, do you see? I can't imagine what that must be like, actually.
I mean, there's still challenges, like, they still do most of their work on computers, and they love games, and they love pulling up basketball highlights on
Right.
YouTube. But,
Right.
I mean, I was looking up dumb YouTube videos too, and, like, I'm okay. So, I
Yeah.
just feel like it definitely at least helps with,
Yeah.
paying attention or getting started on your work or getting caught up on work.
Right.
Um, do I see a ton of change right now? I mean, it helps in, like, the immediate, but as far as, like, cognitive abilities, I mean, it's only been a few months of it, so we'll see, but I think there's benefits.
And what kind of stories? I mean, that's really intriguing. Like what you just described, they had to come up with some. What were the big themes and what were their concerns or
Yeah.
uh
Oh, like, yeah, just topics and
solutions? Like, yeah, like what were there some of their bigger, like what did they think were going to be the downfalls? And did they have any responses to that in terms of how it could be corrected or what they thought? Like,
well, I told them that they didn't have to have a solution if they didn't
so
want
this was just purely dystopian, like what is going to be the problem?
Right,
And
and
what
I
were
I
they?
actually even gave him the option of, like, allegory, so, like, for example, The Crucible, right, was written in the past, it was written back in a
Mm-hmm.
setting in this during Puritan era, but it was really about the Red Scare in the 1950s, so I said,
Mm-hmm.
"You can see a problem today and write a story from the past, but it has that central topic or theme." A lot of them chose the future because that's probably the easiest way to go with this.
Yeah.
A lot of students wrote about, AI
Yeah.
and AI kind of taking over thinking and AI kind of controlling, like, putting too much trust in it and then it kind of um taking over.
Yep.
And a lot of students did, um like, loss of human connection from technology, like, oh, I just graded one where, like, it was like mother and son were on their phones and, too much, and there was like a virus that just their phones got ruined, and, they noticed, "Oh, I'm able to work better," or this, and
Hmm.
like, there were just so many different ones. Some of them were about, like, pollution, some of them were about, mental health or, like, bullying, but majority of them were kinda technology-based,
Technology based.
AI-based, and yeah, which is really interesting because it's the same kids that also were, like, questioning and asking me, "Hey, why can't we use AI?" And having logical arguments for, like, it's a tool. Why can't I use it to check my grammar? Which is so valid, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I've used it to check my grammar, like, of course. So it's just interesting to kind of see, like, they're recognizing this could be a problem, but also I do like it and I do want to use it. So it's
Hmm.
just it's it's interesting.
So your optimism lies in the fact that these students have the ability to kind of discern, hey, these are potential problems, but we're mentally equipped. I don't think we give them enough credit that we're mentally equipped to kind of handle it. We know what the challenges are, and maybe this is the generation that will rein it in or be able to control it. At least it's on our radar and we know it. They're not just sweeping it under the carpet, right?
Yeah, they're not oblivious to it.
Right.
I think a lot of it starts at home too, our parents helping them form healthy habits with
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
I think like, the first step in solving a problem is recognizing the problem. And so
Mhm.
I have hope because I don't think that they're oblivious.
Yeah,
Yet they hear it all the time from older generations, like, oh, your generation doesn't know how to work hard anymore. And like, that's my biggest peeve because it's the same vibe as whenever the crabby teachers are raining on the first year teachers parade.
yeah,
And it's like, come on. Like, if you grew up during this time too, you would have an Instagram too. Like,
for
just let,
sure.
and so I think it's, parents and teachers that still need to help them learn how to form healthy habits. But
Yeah,
yeah, I don't think some of these high schoolers, like the work that they're producing, I'm like, wow, like this is pretty great.
yeah. Cool.
Um, you guys are very capable. Yeah. So
That's great. Well, all right. Look, I've kept you for a while here. Is there any last things you want to say to anybody? Anything you want to sign off with, or last thoughts? Think of your audience. These are teachers, so ideally, we're trying to give teachers some inspiration, some hope, some
yeah,
some nugget, some pearl to take back with them that says, "Yeah, hey, this is what I can." Like, I love when I hear a podcast and I'm like, I'm going to try to apply that.
like that.
Yeah,
I guess what I'll say to teachers, oh my gosh, I feel so much pressure right now.
lots of pressures on.
I know. I think that what I'd say, honestly, to anybody listening right now is, especially if you're a teacher, or even if you're not a teacher, I think that the work that you're doing is important. And I think that any feelings that you're feeling about life right now, what you're doing, or any confusing feelings, I want you to know that you're not alone.
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with having or shame in having any feelings that you have. Um, I think that people should remember that just because your job is hard doesn't mean somebody else's isn't hard as well. And that we just really need each other. And so I just think like, do what you need to do to keep your flame alive, even if it's barely flickering. If that means having an afternoon coffee at work, if that means saying, hey, I'll get those papers graded tomorrow, whatever it might be, take care of you first because your kids will thank you for it. And your kids will thank you for being a human. So
Yes.
you're not alone, and I'm with you. And just thanks for listening.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Molly, this has been amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Everybody can go find you on TikTok, Miss
Mhm.
Dugan. And I think on Instagram, you're Miss Dugan one, right? The number one.
On both of them, I'm Miss Dot Dugan one.
Miss Dugan one. All right. We'll link to it in the show notes.
Okay, awesome.
All right. This has been fantastic. Talk to you forever, but I think we have to let you go now. This is great. Everybody is going to tune in. They're going to love this one. This is great. Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
having me.
All right. Bye bye.
Shine